Just relax. Imagine falling deeply into yourself. All your internal structures collapse. And your center of consciousness seems evenly distributed throughout your body in the immediacy of all that which is around you. You can't say that you're separate or united. You can't say you're witnessed and witnessed. You can't say anything about this. Because there are no words for it. Words are created for communication between people about their common worlds. It's an agreed upon code by which we talk to each other by means of nouns and verbs. We construct a world of ideas which supposedly represents the external world, or our, let's say, our experience of both internal and external world. But all of that is fiction stories. From the beginning of life, we're told stories. We're told what our identity is. That we're a little boy or a little girl. We learn vocabulary. We learn spelling. We learn like what it's like to take naps in kindergarten. I really don't know what the purpose of those naps were. I didn't at the time think they were stupid, but I couldn't catch the purpose, and I still don't know. But to know the self, that's something completely different. Notice I said the self, not myself. Because there's no real possessive in this state. I'm the self, you are the self. We all are the self. And that's not meant to imply that there's one universal self, like everything green possesses greenness. It's more like saying, I'm home now at the zero state of being. I rest in the self. My mind barely works. But ideas no longer create images or stories that I have to follow. I'm just the self, no separation. The self can't be pictured, really can't be talked about because talking about it takes you out of the immediacy of the self into thoughts, descriptions, and concepts. Becoming the self is not really knowing the self. It's just being the self, the center of your known and unknown universe. But everything that you experience in your family life and school life, work life, takes you out of yourself or the self and puts you in a conceptual container. You're an employee, a union representative, or whatever you think yourself to be, which is where you most commonly live in your consciousness. Do you take on the attitude of being a worker or being the boss? In your own life, do you take on the pose of being a human or the pose of being the self? When Robert says you don't exist, he means there are no words that can denote who you are. You're just there. Your existence as a human is a story. Your existence as an artist is just a story. They're not truth. Truth is something belonging to the nature of language. When is a story or a statement true or false? It's conventional. It's part of a communications pattern. The self can't be talked about. Self can't be known. You can only be the self. When you live as the self or an identity with self, There's no contraction in you. You're not identified with anything. You have no identity. You have no words to state who or what you are. So to speak, you can say that you live in the heart of awareness. But that's really nonsense. That seems to convey meaning. It's better to say that you live in freedom. Freedom from any concepts. Freedom from any obligation. Freedom from fear. When you live from the self, everything changes from before when you weren't living in self. At first, it feels like living in an uncontracted universe compared with the contraptions or constrictions that we normally live in, where we have an identity as a student, doctor, an artist, business owner. A human, a son or a father. These are all useless names given to us to fill us with knowledge about the world. But the knowledge is about a world that doesn't exist. It's about the concepts we create and the matrix that those concepts build. That's why that movie, The Matrix, and its two successors, is so dramatically real. Because all of us live in a matrix until we know that zero state within us, which is a world without meaning, an existence without meaning, a life without meaning or concepts. There's no morality in that world, no efficiency or efficacy. There just is an ever-flowing life. That we are not 1/1000th of a millimeter removed from. In this experience, you cannot say, I am the self, separate from the world. You can't say whether the world exists or doesn't exist, because nobody will understand what world you're talking about, whether you're talking about their world or how everybody perceives it, or their specific world of the speaker. otherwise known as the matrix. You have to become dumb as a rock to escape the matrix. The matrix is filled with identities, things to do, places to go, things to have, things to attain or to let go of, things to do. There's nothing you can say about the self, nothing you can say about the external world that isn't just talking about an imaginary matrix, the matrix that society imposes on us and education imposes on us and media imposes on us. I'm looking whether this matrix has a Darth Vader in it. I don't see any. Or a Han Solo. In our minds, most of us are always striving for something, an understanding, a completion, maybe rest, sleep, fighting off exhaustion, worry about our health. But none of that is real. You're talking about imaginary things, not within our experience, because our experience is unitary. All religions are part of the matrix. When we are the self, you're no longer in the matrix. Here, there's such peacefulness of not having a mission, a goal, a job. You just live as yourself. I know that if you're young, it's hard to fight off your concepts of what you should do and what you should be, because so much of human existence is programmed into us by genetics and by the stages of life development that our mammalian bodies go through. We have so many fears, don't we? fear of failure, fear of dying, fear of COVID, fear of Republicans, fear of failure, fear of success. And we find it so hard many times to turn within and not exploring ourselves, but just settling into ourselves. No need to plunge deeply into ourselves because that plunging is all imaginary. It's about imaginatively turning our attention inwards into the dark void of your chest or gut. But when we're the self, we're not constrained to do anything anymore. Just living as the self, living non-separate from anything. Feels so absolutely right. But the word truth never comes into your mind because you know that there's no truth in the mind. I wonder if little Eddie here has a mind filled with concepts, or does he live freely, unconstrained by ideas or wants and desires? Does he have to fight with himself to take any step, do anything new, or forced to study hours every day? Does he worry about upcoming tests in a couple of weeks? Does he worry about filling out his 1040? Do you worry about filling out your 1040 or whatever it is in Australia? Or whatever 1040 you have to fill out in Hungary? Do you worry about COVID? Do you worry about your marriage or your relationships? Do you worry about somebody else's health? What burdens do you carry? What do you seek? Anyone who comes to a place like this is seeking something. Is it spiritual knowledge? Spiritual attainment? Relief from the troubles of the world? Grace? Do we seek to become better people? Or do we just kick off our shoes, settle in an easy chair, close our eyes, and be comfortable just existing? Be utterly at peace just existing. If there are any energies in our body, they're just there. We don't have to pump them up anymore or refine them or change them anyway or seek them out. When we know the self, it is knowing also the self of all, in the sense that all sentient beings live the same sort of life. But some lived filled with concepts, and others live with very few or no concepts, except if they want to communicate with someone else. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do. Living as yourself. You're in the zero or ground state. There's little or no movement here. Even the idea of making a movement feels like a thing too far to do. It takes us out of our peace. Read the Ashtavakra Gita. I like the translation by Byram because it's poetic and has more the feel of someone that really has attained rest in one's own self. But there are many other translations. But most of them feel scholastic or academic, and they don't move you. I don't like talking in abstractions because I'm creating an artificial world for you when I talk in abstractions. So when I use a word that sounds strange, it may or may not fit your experience. But it doesn't matter because I'm merely describing my own existence as clearly and succinctly as I can, so that you can get to feel where I'm coming from, which is where Robert was coming from. It's a place of knowing, yes, but I'm not knowing truths, just of knowing. Truths are always just related to words and sentences and concepts. Are they true or not? But if you've escaped language by becoming dumb as a rock, there is no truth. Words don't have the immediacy of your life and yourself. Being in yourself or living with yourself or through yourself, it's really easy because there's no concepts. It's a first-hand experience that really can't be described. I can only bullshit away for a while to try to make you or try to help you feel what this state of no thought and openness is like. Robert could not speak of this state either, or what it was like. It's very hard. He depended a lot on using Advaita like words. That life as we live it from the mind is illusory. It's a life that it's about the matrix. The matrices we all share. And really, Robert was asking us to step out of the matrix into the silence of the mind. But until you see that all thought processes are useless and they describe an existence that doesn't exist, but it's all in our heads, we will persist in thinking until it becomes clear that thought in the mind talk about an artificial entity called the matrix. Until you can step outside of that matrix, you can't be free. And you can only step without when you see how the mind creates an artificial world that occupies us 100%. And even in spirituality, we try to understand what these experiences mean from the position of being locked in the matrix. So there's only two ways out. Take a red pill somewhere, or begin to understand that words are not truth. Ideas are not truth. Identities are not truth. Self-imposed missions are not truth. Truth is met when you're dumb as a rock and you don't struggle to get any matrix back. I got a couple people that write to me from India who say they can perform rituals and say mantras that will please the gods. And if I make nothing but a small donation towards these rituals, God will be happy with me and give me all kinds of booty. I don't have the heart to tell them that they're just playing around in one of their own matrices where gods can be propitiated, boons given, healings accomplished magically. Sure, all those things can happen. But when you're self, you don't care. Whatever is fine. Except in Ian's case, because he shook his head in understanding, which shows he didn't understand. Just joking, Ian. Spencer's been writing me lately. That means he's about to leave or else make another step upwards from being a mere visitor to someone on the road to attain. Max, he doesn't write or communicate with me anymore. He's filled with so many judgments about me and anger. Once he sent me 3 emails that made me out to be the worst nightmare and horror in the world. I was so stung by it that I just cut him off for a long while. I couldn't take the pain. Now it doesn't matter because all words are hollow. All sentiment is hollow. Everything is of the matrix. And I don't want to live in the matrix. I want to be free. Free from the matrix. Free from surrender to God or to Jesus or Krishna. Just to be. Because in just being, without any judgment, without any concepts, without any desires, without anything to do, brings such absolute happiness. And sometimes the happiness gets so refined and so deep. I'm taken completely over by this bliss for minutes or hours at a time, when just being resting in myself brings such utter happiness. And I know it's the same for you, each and every one. Escape your mind. How do I do that, you ask? Well, for me, it mostly happened after years and years of practice, when I saw that practice really wasn't doing much. And what I had to do was to just be aware of what my mind was doing and saying, and seeing it was utterly repetitive. It was something I entertained myself with, diverted my attention with, and it produces absolutely nothing worthwhile. The mind is shit. It distracts you from experiencing yourself, fills your mind with things to do, wondrous places to visit, all kinds of schemes of transcendence or self-destruction. And you watch the mind and you see it's a foolish thing. It doesn't measure up to you. It's only an impediment to your own being. You're being free and living fully in yourself rather than in the conceptual world that everybody else lives in, their matrix. Vasilina hates the matrix she lives in. And she rebels against it by failing to study, because the matrix demands that she study so that she can get a certificate or she can get a job as a doctor. Most of us are like this too, aren't we? Especially when we're young. When we're older, we're so settled in our matrices, we don't question them anymore. We just abide by them and do the minimum necessary to complete our tasks from day to day. And all bliss escapes us, and we live in a mundane world. We've lost the divine spark, where every moment is a joy, and traded it for a conceptual prison. It's all about the mind. It's all about escaping your mind. And when you escape your mind, you're living in yourself. Watch how trivial the mind is. Watch how the mind is centered in your brain, in your head. And when you get rid of it, you can settle into the totality of your body, which itself is centered in the totality of your existence, where the self and the external world are not two. Mark, what have you to say to all my bullshit?
I really liked it, especially the last few minutes. I thought you were really on point. And just a couple of things. Yeah, I'm not so sure I want to talk with you, but I'll email you about that. Things have deepened lately and they're going on everything is good here, but I have a few observations. One is that you stated that Nisargadatta said that like the whole purpose of the spiritual journey is to go from the verbal world to the non-verbal experience, right?
I have said that in the past.
Yeah, so I think another way of paraphrasing that is this path or spiritual awakening is about going from the imaginary to the real and the true. And that has to start with what one begins with, which is one's self. If one's self is a fraud, if it's an artificial construct, and everything received by that self is tainted by that fraudulent, imaginary, illusory self.
Yes.
And one more Marxism. Robert used to say, your body is an illusion, right? Can I speculate on what he may have meant by that?
Sure.
I could be wrong. Okay. When he says your body is an illusion, the body itself is absolutely 100% certifiably there. Where the illusion comes in is that it's yours. This you that seems to inhabit and manage the life of this person is an utter fraud. And that's where the illusion is. Tying it to this entity, Mark, which doesn't exist as an ongoing independent entity. It only has the reality that myself gives it. So that's where the illusion is that somehow I inhabit this body. I am this person. That's where the illusion is. What would he say to that?
I'm just wondering, how does that stand as a justification for Robert to say the body is illusory? It's an illusion.
He'd have to say your body. Your body's an illusion. But the illusion is that the body stands in for the self, which is we identify with the body, and therefore we're tied to the mundane self. And the mind is part of the body, right? But I just want to segue into another Marxism, last one, I promise. What a strange universe, what a strange world we're born into, where everything that we believe from a spiritual perspective turns out to be built on a house of cards, turns out to be not at all what we always firmly and unquestionably thought it was. And then we find out that there is a back door, there is a route out of it that's possible to vacate this fraud, but it's really difficult to achieve. So isn't it strange? And the conclusion I reached is that nature doesn't want us to be enlightened, but it provides for that possibility if we are earnest enough. But nature wants us to be like programmed robots for our species survival. So that's just my last Marxism for the day. Everything else is good.
I still don't get how you think you've explained why when Robert says the body is illusory, it's an illusion, it's a, what did he say? It's a optical hallucination. How did the concept that you put forward jive with that?
Because the body is the MacGuffin.
What?
The body is the anchor. The body is the anchor that has us believing that we are a person. Because there's a body, we identify with this entity Mark. So without the body, we could be free form totality of self much more easily. There's this distraction of the human that is incarnated that we identify with as being us. So while the body is real, the fact that there's an ongoing entity that's managing it and living it is where the fraud is perpetuated, that it's my life,
Well, I
that
don't
I'm Mark.
disagree with you, but I'm just
Okay.
saying that doesn't seem to explain why Robert said that your body is illusion. It's an optical illusion, other than to tell you a lie that begins to help you free yourself from the matrix.
Yeah,
Is that what you meant?
it's a gross simplification and shortcut to get quick results. I agree with that. Yeah. Like you said, he was looking to alleviate suffering in people.
Yes, I've said that too many times, is that usually religious philosophies have a point. They want to relieve you of certain kinds of suffering that one finds in the mundane world, like fear of death. So the Hindus talk about you don't ever really die. The essence of you just continues in an afterlife and then is reborn sometime later according to certain mechanics that they set forth, astral mechanics. I even have one person tell me, when I said I don't believe in reincarnation, and then he said, that's because you haven't watched yourself entering into a womb and becoming a fetus like he had. That's true. I've never watched myself entering the fetus, nor do I have a memory of that happening. So to me, the idea of reincarnation doesn't really help me escape from the fear of death. But there are other people, like the Christians, who talk about a heaven and a hell, but superimpose big constraints on your entering either. And it's called a moral system with laws in it about killing and stealing and coveting, etc. If you do the play by the rules, his rules, Christ's rules, or God's rules, according to the 10 Commandments, and also added on Christ's love each other as you love yourself, when a lot of people don't love themselves or know how to love themselves. How can you love yourself if you don't know what yourself is? That you see everything you thought about yourself was an illusion. So that didn't work for me either. So these religions give you a belief system that's supposed to give you a relief from a certain kind of worry or suffering, whether it's of death or illness, by saying be healed by the word of God, and all these things that are to take you out of the suffering from your matrix, by saying there's a rescue from your matrix, rather than by saying the matrix is entirely false. The matrix that you live in doesn't really exist. It's a concept, a series of intertwining concepts that seem so real because it's so self-consistent. But when you live without the mind, there's no matrix there. The mind creates the matrix. And when you see the utter fraud of thoughts and the things thoughts make you do, You gain freedom from them by seeing the fraud of mind. And so many spiritual practices don't aim to show you the fraud of thoughts, but they aim to give you aids within the matrix to escape the fraud of the matrix or the pain of the matrix. One such thing is, Christian evangelical teachings about just surrendering to Jesus, and your life will change for the better, and he will guide you and do this and do that. Or the fraud of meditation, where meditating in emptiness for a long period of time is going to somehow free you from the matrix. It just adds a big, big, big chamber of emptiness to your constructed world of the matrix or of your mundane world. Makes your mundane world bigger. It's got a new room called emptiness, which is still imaginary. But having no imagination, seeing that any attempts at picturing by words or photographs or concepts or spiritual philosophies, none of that can get you out of the matrix. You have to see the fraud of the matrix. And that can happen by getting a glimpse of yourself. Maybe it lasts an hour or 2 hours, where the mind doesn't talk anymore. And you don't think, and you just find such amazing joy at being free from, temporarily, from the matrix you live in all the time. The mundane world is your matrix. So what is your red pill? Is it meditation? Is it understanding? Is it surrender? Or is it jnana? Seeing through the matrix. That we live in a matrix. That we live in ideas. We live in patterns and conditionings. We live in the conventional. So what is our red pill? You know, the Matrix movie could be redone to more fit the plight of the spiritual seeker, and to actually show you how you could see through the mind by watching it and seeing how trivial it is and how it entertains you all the time, and that you get hysterical when you don't have the mind to depend on for always being there with talking to you. The mind is always talking to you, so you feel comforted. And the self has no self-talk. And it's like being naked in a strange world that has no form anymore. That's immediate. That's open. No goals, except to just be in experiencing your being without the mind, without concepts, without conditioning anymore. The desire to repeat life day after day in the same mold out of this for security's purpose leaves you. You no longer live the same life. You live free. But at first, it's sort of scary because the mind is not there to comfort you and to make you feel secure. In a sense, it's lonely too, because there's nobody else in it. You're everything. You don't have the mind talking to you anymore, saying, Mark, you're okay, or Mark, there's room for improvement. Or even a mind that's telling you, shut the fuck up, become dumb as a rock. Because you are that rock now. Anybody else reacting in any way? How about the head shakers like Ian? What are you saying yes to, Ian?
I'm saying yes to the whole experience that you give me, Mr. Red Pill.
Say that again.
I'm saying yes to the whole experience that you give me, Mr. Red Pill.
Okay.
You are the red pill.
You got a gold star then today. If you get 3 of them in a row, you don't have to do your homework anymore.
I can really look forward to that, Ed. Thank you.
When I was in high school, I took a printing class because it wasn't a college prep high school. It was more a vocational high school. It did both, actually. But in printing class, you always had homework to do, which is to write your name and the alphabet or something like that and turn it in. And then you begin noticing that certain people got released from doing this homework every day. And it was a real fucking pain in the ass to take the time to write out the alphabet as carefully as you could in your own name, print-wise. And I was getting dumber and dumber because I wasn't being released and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't being released. And then for some reason, I found out that if you just did it almost perfectly 3 days in a row, the teacher released you from that homework. But to have the determination to do it perfectly 3 days in a row instead of 7 days imperfectly was a hard thing to do. Because it was shitty what they were doing to us, inculcating this kind of writing style. So you get 3 gold stars today. 1 more and you're in free. You can enter my heaven.
Ed, I'd also like to say,
And if you do, you'll be kicked out.
yeah, good. I'd just also like to say in front of everybody to thank Mark. Mark is such a treasure. And to hear him challenge what you say or to give his version of what you say, it's magnificent. I see him so bright. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Mark someday will be a great teacher. That's why I encouraged him to run one of the satsangs on Thursday. But after a while, he opted out. I don't know whether you come on Thursdays anymore. Do you, Mark?
Actually, I'm here every day except for 3.
Except for what?
Except for when Maxie's here and except for when you're here, I'm hosting a satsang. And for an hour after the Wednesday and Sundays, I'm also hosting. So yeah, so my presence is here. That's my form of service, is my form of repaying you is what I do, is the reason why I do it. And
Well,
also
keep doing it. Keep doing it.
Thank you.
And he does it so well.
Bernadette, what say you? You look so happy and bursting with ideas to say.
Not really. I was just agreeing that Mark's doing a great job because I show up most days, and he's been a real big help for us.
Who do you love more, Mark or me?
I can't answer that.
Chicken shit.
I know.
Spencer, who do you love more, me or Mark?
I'm not sure because you guys are different. So maybe it depends on the day. But I also wanted to say I'm going to still be coming to satsang for the foreseeable future.
What's that?
I'll still be coming to satsang for the foreseeable future. So,
Okay. Who else has something to say? Just raise your hand and say it. Raise your hand, Eddie, and say something.
I love you, Ed. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. You two still fighting every day? It stopped, huh?
Every second day. No, we're doing okay. We sit with it, you know, we're doing okay. The stuff comes up, we sit with it.
And we say, stop it.
And that works. When you told me the ego doesn't exist, that helped enormously. This learning that I am responsible for everything, not the ego, not the Holy Spirit, not Jesus, not Ed, not anything else. I am responsible. It's been, and your two teachings, the ego doesn't exist and relax, have helped me hugely.
Relax.
Relaxes. Oh man, what a mantra.
You know,
What a mantra.
the thing in spirituality is the term ego is thrown around all too often. How do you escape the ego and become the true self or stuff like that? But it's easy to escape the ego when you see there is no such thing. It's just a fucking word. And usually a word people apply to you because you do something they don't like. And they say, that's ego. I can see ego in you.
It's a bit like the Christian devil. You know, it's something you can blame for everything, and
It's
something outside of yourself. That
like
you
the
can
Christian
blame.
what?
Devil.
Oh, yeah.
Something that you're not in control of, something that can affect you, something that renders you a victim.
Lizard
And
people
you
do
put it in
that
sort
too.
of holy clothes. You've made it special. And, you know, it's the ego. Now it's part of my spiritual journey, and you know it has to be conquered. In the ashram, there was the thing to leave your ego with your shoes. And I used to look at it and go, what? Every day you had to leave your shoes before you went to satsang. And there was the sign, leave your ego with your shoes.
Then there's always the lizard people with their alien influence over the human race, like Angela talked about, and that I had to get rid of by going to one of her spiritual mentors, and have her work on you so that you can see the true light as opposed to the false light. Can anybody tell me what's the difference between the true light and the false light?
Size of the battery.
spiritual people are all fucked up, aren't they? Even worse than that is politicians that are telling you different truths. The Republicans tell you one truth, which doesn't make sense anymore because it's Trump. And then there are I'm so damn glad that Biden is president. He's probably the most competent president we've had since LBJ or FDR. He's making massive changes in the whole structure of government as well as the structures of our society in incredible ways, and he's not getting any rewards for it. He's just being pissed on by the press and everybody else, especially the Republicans, and even the Democrats are pissing on him. But he is fucking competent. And after the horror of the 4 years of Trump waiting for the H-bombs to begin dropping at any time, what a relief. And he doesn't get any credit for it. Eric, what say you?
Yeah, I can't speak much to what's going on in the world. I don't really pay much attention, unfortunately. I'm living in my own bubble here. But yeah, just thank you for today. It seemed to go straight to my heart. You say you speak a bunch of nonsense and bullshit, which I think is true, but it's very pointed, and it has a way of pointing at my own bullshit, and I appreciate that. You mirror back to me what I have difficulty on my own sometimes seeing, and you put it all on display today, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you, and I love you.
Love you too.
And love all you guys.
Saltanat, if that's anywhere near the correct pronunciation. What say you?
What about?
What?
What about?
What about? You can
What
talk
about
about,
I say?
you can talk
Yes.
about anything. You can talk about my red hair. You can talk about Mark's ability to speak. You can talk about how you feel at this very moment. Or you can tell
don't
about somebody
know.
you hate here. You're
I don't
free.
know. Tomorrow I see the film Matrix, and you said you say satsang and matrix and illusion, and I see maybe you see my conclusion.
What is
You
your
don't
conclusion?
understand? I think tomorrow I think I live in illusion. I live in matrix. I see in film matrix, and after I think what's true. It's illusion. It's I illusion. But I don't understand why.
Great. You're becoming dumb as a rock.
Yeah.
Wake up, Veselina. We're calling on you now. What have you to say?
My cat's leg turned on my camera.
Wow. That's deep. I love you all. Give them hell tomorrow, Mark. The ones that come, beat them around the head and face. And remember, as Robert said on his deathbed, freedom. Freedom. Freedom from the mind. Freedom from all tasks and things you have to do. Freedom from the mundane. Freedom from chasing your tail. Freedom from the workaday life. And then you can begin to truly understand some of the saints that Yogananda talked about, who lived in cemeteries and lived off the offerings that people brought to their dead relatives. Who only had one piece of cloth to cover their genitals, or not even bother with that, like Nityananda. They're free. Nityananda was free. No doubt about it. I guess you can say Nisargadatta was free, but when you watch him, he looks like he's pretty wound up. So he may have been wound up in his task of waking people up, and he was failing at it, so he didn't know what the fuck to do. So he just got louder and louder, and more anxious and more angry. Robert said he didn't like Nisargadatta at all because he was so rude. He said especially rude towards Balsikar. I was wondering what he was doing in India 34 years after his enlightenment. What the hell did he do in those 34 years between what he told us about being in India with Ramana and in 1979, 1980, when he was with Nisargadatta? It's all a mystery. It's all a mystery. He's probably in jail somewhere, maybe in Kansas. That's why there's no past mentioned. But that's just one speculation that his students had about him. How come we don't know anything about his past? It's because he didn't want us to know about his past. He used to say he didn't get Social Security because he never wanted to have anything to do with the government. But once we were in a dentist's office filling out paperwork to get dental work done, it asked for Social Security number. And I said, I don't know what to do here, Robert. It's asking for your Social Security number. And then he gave it to me after denying he didn't get Social Security or have anything to do with the government. What a fucking liar. But it's a good lie. It's a good lie. I love you all. Someday I'll make up a story about my immediate past in jail or not in jail. Take care. and see who's going to get. Oh, David is here. Okay, Eric, are you willing?
I gotta go soon, but I can just hand it over to Mark or whoever else is willing, or just give it to somebody else.
Okay, I'll give it to somebody else. Eddie, can you do it?
Yeah, I have to go as well in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, fucking, Ian, do you have somewhere to go right now?
Well, now I've had my prostate operation. No.
Okay, I'm turning it over to Ian and Cassie. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, Ed.
Mark, your name wasn't up there, so you weren't on the chosen list.